And now, again, please welcome Dr. Jack Levison.
Well, let's be honest, Bishop Debbie, when we got the invitation to speak, it was really to Priscilla, and you said, and Jack is welcome as well. So we need to be honest about this, and maybe after I preach, you'll know why it was done. Oh, you're going to a rejoinder from the bishop?
No, thank you. Thank you for your candor and your honesty. I really appreciate that.
I tell you, yeah, I love to hear Priscilla preach, who's sitting way back there, and you'll hear her teach this afternoon. But when you were setting this up, you said, I want to see how this happened. Well, how this happened was I thought she was going to talk about last night. So yesterday we got to the airport at DFW in Dallas at about 2:30, plenty of time for our flight, and the heavens opened, and the thunder went, and the lightning came, and the delays began. And so we're group number 5 on our flight. Finally, 4 hours later at 8 o'clock, we are boarding. And 1, 2, 3, 4 have already gone in. It tells you our status in life. We're group number 5. And we're standing in line, and everybody out there gets a text. Your flight is leaving at 9 a.m. on today's the 21st, right? On the 22nd. And everybody's confused, and we look at the people at the gate, and they're talking to each other, and they said, oh, we're so sorry, this flight is going to stay here all night. And then, no joke, so I immediately try to find customer service, right? And so I'm going down concourse, and this wonderful flight attendant, I said, where is customer service? And she points, and she said, that line. She said, but you can do it on your mobile app. And this angelic flight attendant for American Airlines walked me through my app, because I'm a total gimp, walks me through my app, and we got the last 2 seats on the 9 p.m. flight. Now yeah, I know. Well, you better wait to see if you want to clap, because you could have done without this sermon if I were not here. So, you may say, why do you have to make that flight? But you will notice that we're a little dressed down because we had to pack a bag, because Priscilla's a minister and a theologian, so she had to have her robe for communion today, so we had to pack a bag, and of course that's where all our good clothes are. So I look like a 35-year-old, very trendy pastor with skinny jeans. Just picture me in skinny jeans and a black t-shirt and a couple tats, and you'll know what I wish I were or had been 30 years ago. Okay, so this morning, where's my show? Oh, there it is, my show. My show. Whoa, what happened to my power? Oh, there it is. Can I just stand and look at myself for a minute? How cool is, Priscilla, how cool is this? This should be you. This should be you. And I would pull my shirt tighter, but it won't work. So today we're going to talk about Elijah and a tale of 2 mountains. And if you look on the picture, on the left is Mount Carmel. How many of you have been to Israel and seen all this? Yeah, I mean, most of you. So Carmel on the left, Mount Sinai on the right. And we're going to look at Elijah, who was on both mountains. And I'm going to ask you at the end of the sermon, I'm going to ask you which mountain you're going to be willing to stand on. Because you have been through a lot of crap. A lot has gone on, and you are still here. But that doesn't mean your inner self is here. Your body is here, and boy, for that, you need to be commended. But what goes on inside is another story. And we're going to kind of get inside into Elijah to help us to understand where we are today. So, mountain number 1, Carmel in the north. So God tells Elijah that this drought, you get the idea of a drought, the last few years have been something of a drought, a several-year drought is going to come to an end. So Elijah goes to King Ahab and says, gather all the prophets of Baal, all 450 of them, and they're going to have a confrontation. But actually, that's not the real confrontation. Before he confronts the prophets of Baal, what Elijah does is he addresses the Israelites who can't quite decide in the midst of this drought whether they're going to opt for God, the God of Israel, or Baal, the God of the land. Because Baal is the one who determines the rain. And so they're not sure which way they're going. So Elijah asks them, why are you limping between two opinions? This is a terrific Hebrew verb because it is exactly the same Hebrew verb when he's asking them, why are you limping between two opinions? Why are you trying to decide, disaffiliate, stay, disaffiliate, do this, do that? I don't know what to do. Which way should we go? And so they're limping between two opinions. This is exactly the same word that is used of the prophets of Baal as they're cutting themselves and going around the altar hoping that Baal will talk. They're dancing and hopping and cutting and doing all these things to get Baal to listen to them. So Elijah addresses the Israelites with exactly the same word in Hebrew that describes the prophets of Baal as they're limping between two opinions. And as they're limping around this altar, hoping Baal, and I've heard in the commentaries where it says, your God is on the toilet. Your God is taking a crap on the toilet. Forgive me for this. Your God is taking a crap on the toilet. I looked it up when I was preparing this, and I really couldn't find it, because if I could have found it, I would have told you that that's the right interpretation. It's just, it's sleep. Is your God falling asleep? So they can't decide, and the Israelites are like the prophets of Baal that are limping around the altar. And notice where the prophets of Baal are getting with all this limping? Nowhere. It's the same with the Israelites. They're limping in their faith, and you know where that takes them? Nowhere. I think there's something for us in this image of the Israelites limping in their faith the way the prophets of Baal are limping around the altar. The split is largely over. Largely. Roughly half of the churches here have decided not to be here, right? Roughly. In that context, what clear, unequivocal vision of God are we as lay and clergy leaders offering our people so that they do not limp? Are we giving them a clear vision of who God is going forward? Or are we limping around too? Are we still in our inner selves not sure where we are to go? Or are we called to something more, to something better, to something bold, to something world transforming? Are we called to something church transforming? This is our time to do that, people. The drought is over, the rains are on the horizon, and it is our time to call our people to stop limping and start moving. Now, you will find out that Priscilla and I moved into a college dorm 2 years ago. I tell people I turned 65 in a college dorm. We live in a dorm on the SMU campus. So I don't know if have any of you heard of Philip Yancey? Yeah, Philip Yancey. So I asked him if he'd promote my book. I just kind of wrote him and said, would you be willing to promote 7 Secrets of the Spirit-Filled Life? And I gave him my bio and my CV. And then I said, we live in a dorm, told him a little bit. He writes me back and he said, to be honest, I'm more impressed that you live in a dorm than with your CV, with your curriculum vitae, with your resume. And it's kind of an amazing thing. But in order to get students to come to events, I often write limericks. So I wrote a limerick for you. And I didn't know what to do about gender pronouns, so it's all she. I kept switching it around. I'm just going to leave it as she. There once was a Christian. Now, this is about this Elijah thing. There once was a Christian who dithered, and her faith, well, it very soon withered. She bumbled and stumbled, and then she just grumbled. She went round in circles, not thither. So let's not be like the Israelites, whose unwillingness to commit to a single God and a straightforward way and a bold vision for the future caused them to limp in their faith like the prophets of Baal, limping around an ineffectual altar. They were hedging their bets between God and Baal and getting nowhere. Let's not go nowhere. Let's go thither. Mountain number 2. So, after all this happens, Queen Jezebel says, I'm going to kill you the way you killed the prophets of Baal. And Elijah gets really scared and he runs away. Literally runs away after this amazing confrontation on Mount Carmel. He runs away. He goes for 40 days way down south, kind of like from where I was born on Long Island, down to Huntsville, Alabama. He goes from Carmel in the north to Sinai in the south. And he goes to Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai. What took place on Mount Sinai? 10 Commandments. Who was up on Mount Sinai? Took Elijah 40 days. Moses was on the mountain for 40 days. Then, as you heard, earthquake, wind, and fire. Same thing happened in Sinai. What is Elijah up to by running from Mount Carmel in the north to Mount Sinai in the south? You're going to love this. He's retreating to the safety of the past. Frightened to death by Jezebel, who pledges he'll die the way the prophets of Baal died, he travels 40 days from Mount Carmel to Mount Sinai, and frankly, it looks as if God is not bothered by this. It looks as if God is okay with Elijah running away. God says this. Oh, here we go. God says this. Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. The Lord is about to pass by. Sounds like a great promise, right? And especially when you understand that these words pass by translate the same Hebrew word as in Exodus 33, which is about Moses talking with God. In Exodus 32, Moses goes up to the mountain and gets the 10 Commandments. Oh, golden calf. Moses comes down from the mountain, shatters the 10 Commandments. Exodus 34, Moses goes up to the mountain again and gets a second set of the 10 Commandments and brings them down. In the middle of that, Moses and God have a pretty fierce negotiation about how things are going on, in which God says things like, the people you brought out of Egypt. You know, that kind of thing. And they're arguing back and forth, but in the context of this negotiation, God had said to Moses 3 times, pass by. God said this. So, I will make all my goodness pass by you, God said to Moses. And while my glory passes by, I will put you in the cleft of the rock, God says to Moses. And I will cover you with my hand until I have passed by, God says to Moses. Back up to Elijah. Elijah has retreated to the past, and it looks very much like God is going to let him stay there, because God is about, as God did with Moses, pass by. And this is exactly what Elijah wants. But this doesn't happen. Elijah is not allowed to remain in the past. He is not allowed to relive the glory days. God tells Elijah, it's up here, God tells Elijah, go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. So what does Elijah do? Exactly that, right? He goes out, he stands on the mountain, he waits for the Lord to pass by. Absolutely not, right? Absolutely not. He waits until the whole ordeal, the storm, is over. It's like American Airlines. Let's wait till the whole storm is over, and then we'll fly you out. Thankful for that. Last 2 seats on the Mountain Express. Only then, when there is dead silence, does he come out. Let me say that again, since I interrupted myself way too many times on that. He waits until the whole ordeal, the storm, is over. And only then, when there is dead silence, does Elijah come out. Here's how the story reads. Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord, you know the story, was not in the earthquake. You can almost join me if you'd like. That'd be fine. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, the sound of sheer silence, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Compare this with Moses, centuries earlier on Mount Sinai, when there had been an earthquake, fire, and then at the climax of it all, the sound of a trumpet blaring. And if I had better technological capacity, I was really going to try to put a trumpet in here, but I knew I'd blow it and it wouldn't work. So, right? Exodus 19, centuries before Elijah, reads like this. Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke because the Lord had descended upon it in fire, while the whole mountain shook violently. As the blast of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses would speak and God would answer him in thunder. So there's this amazing climax. There's this rumbling and there's smoke like a kiln and the mountain shakes and then vroom, and you know God is there. Elijah has very much the same things. Winds, earthquakes, shattering, right? Fire. But instead of the there's no sound at all. Now it becomes clear. God will not allow Elijah to retreat to the past, to withdraw to a bygone era, to escape to the glory days. And why? Because Elijah waits until it's all over before going out. And there's something even more in this text, which I just saw this last week, something just as powerful in the subtle narrative artistry of the Old Testament. If you look at it, I color-coded this. God says in green, go out, and look at the bottom. He went out, and then in blue, God said, stand on the mountain, and in the bottom, he stood, and God said, stand on the mountain before the Lord, and Elijah stood at the entrance of the cave. He wouldn't even come out on the mountain. So here's what we've got. Elijah had come to Mount Sinai to retreat to the past. God obliged, as in the days of Moses, with wind, earthquake, and fire on Mount Sinai. But Elijah was absent, still in the cave. So God did not pass by. God wasn't in the wind. God wasn't in the quake. God wasn't in the fire. All that Elijah heard was silence instead of the sound of a trumpet. This is not a still small voice that Elijah heard. It's the eerie silence after a storm. It's dead quiet. Elijah had waited and hung back and missed God altogether. And what does Elijah learn from all of this? This is tragic too. Before any of this earthquake, wind, and fire stuff happens, before the wind, the earthquake, the fire, God asks innocently enough, what are you doing here, Elijah? And Elijah goes on and says, I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. The Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword. I alone have left. They're seeking my life to take it away. That's why I'm in this stupid cave. And then all the theophany, seminary word, the theophany. And then, after it's all over, there came a voice and said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? And he answered, I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites. It's like in the old Peanuts cartoons when the adults talk. I'm not listening, right? He just says the same thing. What has Elijah learned from God's all this stuff? What has he learned? That's right, nothing. Nothing at all. He leaves Sinai unchanged, untaught, and worst of all, he leaves Mount Sinai uninspired. Good people, let us not retreat to the past and yearn for what once was. It is no longer ours to have. Good people. I'm not over, by the way. It's still got more, so don't think I'm done. Okay, I'm not done. If I were in a classroom, you'd know, because I would take the hour and 10 minutes. You don't know. I'm not done yet. Good people. Let us not wait too long for God to pass by and be passed by. Good people, let us not hang back at the entrance to the cave when God tells us to move into the center of the storm and prefer safety to divine presence. God is passing by, even if, like Elijah, you are deeply frightened by all that has happened and may happen. Even if you are deeply troubled, deeply worried, and deeply wounded, and I know many of you are, that will not keep our hurricane God from passing by. So leave your mantle behind, run out of the cave, stand in the storm as God passes by. So 2 years ago, we moved into the dorm. It was a stupid decision. We could have retired, right? Students bounce and run on the floors above our bedroom at all hours of the night, and who knows what else they do. We won't talk about that. And they have. Sometimes they'll knock on our door to grab a hot chocolate or a latte when Priscilla and I are very happily cozy on our couch watching Netflix or an old British thing with the cat on our lap. We're not in a cave. It's windy, it's quaky, it's fiery in that dorm. And sometimes, just sometimes, we get to see God pass by. On Tuesday nights, we started a thing called Lattes in Lent, where we invited students, and we build it as for students of faith, of no faith, of any faith. And that's what we got. Jew, Sikh, Catholic, Protestant, atheist, agnostic, and who do we leave out, Priscilla? And their conversations are amazing. We set them up with a little bit of food, and we put a little ambient lighting as much as you can in a dorm. And we sit in the back on a couple stools, and we listen to them, and we watch God pass by. And you know how we did that? We did that because for one good time in our life, we stepped out of the cave, and we went into a place of storm, and God, very kindly for us, passed by. Now, I'm not holding Priscilla and me up, maybe Priscilla, but not me, as prophets. We're not prophets, but at one moment in our life, we made a single decision, and I'm talking to you people, we made a single decision at one moment in our life to step out of the cave. Where's your cave? Where do you need to step? Where's the storm? It's clear application. I'm not a preacher. I'm a layperson. I'm a teacher. I can't make subtle applications. If you're in a cave, get out of it, go stand in the storm, and God will pass by. The only way God won't is if you stay in the stupid cave. So this is your moment. The ground has shifted, and here we are, the same and yet so different. This is your moment to rally the courage, to muster the curiosity, to embrace the cacophony of the future, and you can only hope there's plenty of cacophony in your future. Because that's where the storm is. That's where God passes by. So step out of the cave before, not after, God passes by. Now, I said this was going to be a tale of two mountains. Not that you paid attention to the title, but that's the title. A tale of two mountains. Carmel and Sinai. Earlier, and now we're getting toward the end. Earlier on Mount Carmel, Elijah had said, I only am left. Remember that? I am left. And then he went about the work of challenging Baal and changing Israel. He recognized it was all up to him. And then he runs to Mount Sinai, and 40 days later on Mount Sinai, he says the same thing, and he actually says it twice. I alone am left. And instead of going out and changing Israel, he stays in the cave. What was once me against the world, Mount Carmel, becomes the world against me at Mount Sinai. And they sound exactly the same, but they're very different. You get the point, right? Same prophet, same pastor, same layperson, same kid. Two mountains. Same person, two mountains, our choice. Number two, notice what Elijah did on the basis of the realization, I alone am left. Earlier on Mount Carmel, he entered into a flurry of activity. And I was going to read this from the text, but I can't get through it, so I just summarized. I'm going to see if I can do it in one breath. Elijah took 12 stones and built an altar. He made a trench around the altar. He put wood in order. He cut the bull to pieces. He laid it on the wood. He said, okay, fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood. Then he said, do it a second time. And they did it a second time. And remember, this is a drought. And again, he said, do it a third time. And they did it a third time so that the water ran all around the altar, filled the trench also with water. That is a lot of activity after he realizes, I alone am left. But later on Mount Sinai, when God told Elijah to do one thing, to stand on the mountain, Elijah instead waited and he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave, and that's it. You get the point again, right? Same prophet, two mountains. Carmel, and Sinai. Which mountain do you want to be on? That's not a rhetorical question. And if we could talk with each of you individually, I'd want to hear. In which direction do you want to go now that the United Methodist Church has splintered? Do you want to go toward a bold future or a retreat to the past? Do you want to go toward a flurry of activity to reshape our world, or lethargy? I get it. We're fatigued and depleted, and some of us, I know, are exhausted by it all. Doesn't change the fact there are two mountains. There are two directions. There's the past and there's the future. There's indifference and there's initiative. Your choice. And how does God respond to Elijah on Mount Sinai? God gives Elijah, this is the sad part, God gives Elijah 3 things to do. He's going to anoint the next king of Syria. He's going to anoint the next king of Israel. And God tells him to anoint the next prophet to replace him. You see, if Elijah won't step out of the cave and stand on the mountain and watch God pass by in the storm, then it's time to leave. It's time to be done. If you won't step out of the cave and stand on the mountain before the Lord, and only you know what that means for you and your communities, then it's time to give up being a prophet or a professor or a pastor or a lay leader. Because people of faith, these stories tell us, don't have the luxury of dithering and dancing, of limping and staggering around the altar. That's not what we're allowed to do. We don't have the option to retreat to the past, to stay in the cave, to wait for the storm to pass. People of faith are in the work of rebuilding altars. of bringing rain to our world, of stepping out of safe places and standing in earthquakes, wind, and fire. People of faith get to watch God pass by. So there you have it. Today, right now, right here, you can begin your trip to either of two mountains. You can go to Mount Sinai, where you allow the words, "I alone am left," to cause you to retreat to the past, live in isolation, and respond to God with delay and indifference. You can be a cave dweller, sheltered from the storm, if you like. Or you can allow the words, "I alone am left," to lead you to Mount Carmel, where you, like Elijah, will roll up your sleeves, gird up your loins, and do, excuse me for that. No, don't laugh now. This is the moment. Gird up your loins, and you can do anything it takes to rebuild the altar and bring rain to a dry and desiccated world. A visionary bringing on the storm. Which do you want to be? A cave dweller escaping, or a visionary bringing? Which do you want to be? That's where I want to be, on Mount Carmel, full of energy for the work ahead. And you know what? I walked in today. I walked in and I heard that band, and I watched you from behind. And you want to know something? If you just look around at this wonderful room of people, I think maybe, just maybe, God is about to pass by us. Pass by. Show us the glory. Be there with us. And maybe, just maybe, God is about to pass by Alabama and show us the glory. If we step out of the cave, if we stop dithering, if we stand at the edge of the storm and wait for God to pass by. Our choice, two mountains. Amen.